Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, JW Reads, and today I'm going to be presenting to you my review of Dracula by Bram Stoker. I finished reading Dracula this morning, and I got up and I said, man, I just have to write my review today, so I got some prep ready, and without further ado, let's jump right into it. So, let's start off with the themes. Some themes that were very prevalent during Dracula were good versus evil, of course, but also, less obvious, that the theme that the main character's fate rested in the hands of God, or in God's hands. That's a phrase that they repeat multiple times during the book, especially the mentor character, if you're going by the hero's journey plot structure, but Dr. Von Helsing, he says that many times, our fate is in God's hands. So why that really stuck with me was that it was such a deep contrast to the villain, Dracula. He was repelled by the crucifix and by the holy water, and he was just driven by evil. He was undead. He was wrong, messed up. He was bad. But the main characters, they weren't, in some popular media, Von Helsing will be like this cold-blooded hunter hunting down Dracula, but that's not what it was in the story. Von Helsing was almost a grandfatherly character, and he was a very kind-hearted character, but the what sets the plot off, what really propels the plot, is this spiritual battle. They're not fighting Dracula over something physical, but something much more spiritual, and that reinforces the prevalence of the divine theme. So, another really important piece of dialogue was, "We ride to the death of someone." I believe this was, or I'm paraphrasing there, but I believe that was the dialogue of Dr. Van Helsing as well. And that really just showed kind of foreshadowing, not to spoil anything, but that kind of showed an awareness of the characters, that they were willing to sacrifice, that what they were doing was not for just the present time, but for the future, for the posterity. And that really just makes the story and the resolution of the plot all the much better. So I've watched the movie Von Helsing, one of the movies. I don't know if there are more than one, but I've watched a movie called Von Helsing, and in that movie, Von Helsing is, like I said, he's a hunter. He's hunting down the monster Dracula. He's a monster hunter, and that was quite the opposite of what he was in the story. Dracula, though, was much the same as represented in popular media, and so were his vampire brides as well, if you know anything about those. Another really important character is the character Madame Mina Harker, or that's her married name. It happens later in the book. She doesn't start out as Harker, but I think she starts out as Murray. I'm sorry, I don't remember. But she was a very important character, because we start this book and she's waiting on her husband to return to Britain, to London, where she's at, and to marry her. This is a really important part of the plot, because later the book will center around them saving Mina. But when we're introduced to her, she's sort of like this perfect woman character. Like, she's not too headstrong, she's not vain, she's very modest, but she's also very capable. And I don't know if the character feels like such a good character that would even today be appreciated. It doesn't feel, old-timey. It doesn't feel like out of place in modern literature. It feels like just the perfect representation of what that character can be. I think Stoker does an absolutely brilliant job with Mina's character. So like I've said a few times now, I had big expectations coming in, knowing about vampires. So I already knew about vampires. By the way, this is my initial response here. If you've watched my ratings video, that should be out by the time this video is out. I came into this book knowing a lot about vampires. As you've seen, if you've watched my channel, I've read the Twilight book, but I've watched quite a few movies. So the experience I had was very different from when the book, what the experience with the response must have been when the book came out. Because no one knew about vampires. Unless you were studying old folklore, you didn't know about vampires until Dracula came out. So that's a big difference. I already had in my mind the expectations in the exposition of, where is the one of the main characters, Jonathan Harker, where is he at? I already knew it was Dracula's castle. But the book got really good, really fast, especially in that exposition. It slowed down a lot. It was like really good, and then pretty slow, and then pretty good, but it's still a little slow, and then good, and then, sorry, let me move it back down. Good, and then it kind of, it's pretty good, going pretty steady. And then the resolution was also great. And it was a pretty fast resolution. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I would definitely recommend this. I would definitely recommend Dracula. It's fast to start, gets a little slow, but it has a good ending. And, I haven't said this yet, it has a great sense of closure to it. Rereadability now. I could definitely reread it. I didn't have any problems with the reading. It felt really good to read. It feels very timeless, obviously. I'm reading it, 200 or so years after it came out. It came out in the 19th century, if I'm not mistaken. So, very timeless, obviously. The style was a little strange, because Stoker uses diary entries and, memorandums, stuff like that, to tell the story. It's not happening as you read it. It's already happened and been recorded. So, that changes the meaning of the story, how the plot is portrayed, because you're learning about the past as the present is also unfolding. But the present is slow and is mostly just a reflection on the past. So it gives the past, the core of the plot, even more depth. Okay, where are we at now? Style, yes, alright. So it has a sense of mystery the whole time. We don't really know what's going to happen until it happens. But because of an event with Mina that I've already mentioned, time is short. They're on a time crunch. They've got to accelerate things, speed it up. So that's a big plot accelerator when you get there. Characters, they're great. And all that. So now let me tell you what the characters are. Sorry. We have the mentor, Dr. Van Helsing. He is, he's not from London. He's not an Englishman, but, I can't remember. I think he's Dutch. But he's very learned in vampires and vampire lore and all that. So that's how the characters, kind of learn how to fight Dracula. And then there's Mina Harker, who is, like I already said, a very great character. There's just really nothing wrong with her. She's, just a very kind, loving person, and you can tell because all the characters, they're always talking about how much they love being around Mina and how they don't want her to suffer. So the next character is Jonathan Harker. which ends up being Mina's husband, and he is a big part of the plot because he's being driven to help his wife. That's the big driver of the plot, and that's why I'd say he's one of the main characters, if not one of the most main, like one of the most important characters. And then we have Dr. John Seward, who is he's a psychiatrist, and there's a bit of a side story that plays out with him and one of his patients, but it ends up being very important to the plot. It adds to that sense of mystery. And then there's Lord Godalming, who's got the money and the influence to help the main characters, get what they want. Very convenient plot-wise, but still a great character. And he's in love with with Mina's best friend early on, and you'll have to see where that plot goes, because that gets very intense, very surprising, pretty fast, even though it's in one of the slower parts plot-wise of the story. So I've said Van Helsing, Mina, Jonathan, John, Godalming. I believe the final main character is Quincy Adams. He is from Texas, so he adds this new understanding, this American understanding and outlook on the situation. But he's just kind of like this cowboy figure, and he's willing to give up everything. Like, he doesn't have any ties to anyone, so he's willing to give up everything for their cause. So let me go through this this secondary rating. Characters, check. They're great. Atmosphere, great. I already talked about it. Writing, amazing. Plot, great. Few ups and downs, but that's every book. The interest is maintained the whole time, but more at the very beginning and through the latter rising action and climax, and the logic. Let me talk about this for 1 second, and then I'll let you go. The logic is perfect. Some of the logic relies on the book lore that is constructed by Stoker as the book is being written, as you're reading. So you start to understand more, and then that allows you to, reason stuff out. It allows you to apply logic to the plot. And then enjoyment. Definitely enjoyed it. Would not have finished if I had not enjoyed it. But it's a very important part of pop culture, and I feel like it's definitely something that everybody should at least look at, even if you aren't the biggest vampire fan. It had everything. It had romance, it had action, it had monsters, vampires. They're some of the most important pop culture monsters of our time, so it's definitely important to read this great origin story of sorts, or telling of the Dracula story. So I'm going to have to give it a 10 out of 10. Yes, I know. Not a 5 out of 5. A 10 out of 10. And I just want to put a bookmark in it for now. I hope I see you guys in the next video. Hopefully it's not in months. Hopefully it's in weeks or days. I don't know. We'll see. However fast I can read, School's getting pretty hard, so I say hard. It's getting harder. So, just gotta be ready for, stuff changes. Gotta be ready. Gotta go with the flow. So, thank you all for watching, and have a good one.